Hi, everybody. Forgive the little noises. I am adjusting my microphone. Oh, they're continuing? Is there going to be anything new? So yesterday had dramatic... I'm Dennis Prager, by the way. Yesterday had dramatic footage, and I mean it. It is dramatic footage, some of it very ugly. And why they didn't, in their opening statement, show videos which could have lasted all month of what the left has done to this country in terms of violence, riots, and killings is beyond me. I did not find one of the lawyers, I think the first lawyer, terribly effective, but I am not alone in believing that. As a general rule, in all of history, the good guys or the better guys do not know how to fight. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is. They're all horrified by the video of what took place January 6th and horrify them exponentially by showing what the left did to this country while Democrats cheered, as opposed to Republicans' repugnance. That should be a point that is made there. You might as well use the national forum that you have, if indeed people are watching. I have no idea if people are watching. You have to be very, very interested in politics in general, or specifically in Donald Trump, to watch all of this. But I don't know. That'd be a very interesting thing to find out. Welcome to the show, my friends. Sean, would you please get Tucker Carlson opening statement? Last night, Tucker Carlson went through another gigantic lie of the left. Insurrection is a lie. America as a racist country. Okay, so listen to this.
But that turned out to be nothing compared to the change that came 2 months later. On January 6th, supporters of Donald Trump swarmed the Capitol building. Some forced their way inside. And Washington has never been the same. It may never be the same. As a result of what happened on January 6th, your descendants will live in a very different country. It was a pivot point in our history looking back. Some in Congress have compared that day to 9/11. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has likened it to Pearl Harbor, the day that spurred America's entry into the Second World War. Every day we hear new and more florid comparisons from Democratic partisans. But last night, CNN outdid all of them. Chernobyl? The Bhopal disaster? The Irish potato famine? No. What happened on January 6th was worse than any of that. It was, CNN told us, very much like the Rwandan genocide.
The idea of otherizing people is something I think we saw a lot of over the last 4 years. I mean, it's something we've seen a lot over the last decades, but it's so easy to otherize people, to make people other than American, other than patriotic, other than human, and we've seen it in Bosnia, we've seen it in Rwanda, where radio was telling people, Hutus were telling the radio listeners that Tutsi were cockroaches, for, getting them ginned up for genocide.
The Rwandan genocide, that's what it was like. Keep in mind that close to 1 million people were murdered in Rwanda in 1994. That's about 70% of all ethnic Tutsis in the country. Entire towns were hacked to death with machetes. They were set on fire, crushed alive by bulldozers. Hundreds of thousands of women were raped. It was among the most horrifying crimes in human history. How does a country recover from something like that, from a genocide? Well, first, obviously, you punish the guilty quickly and severely. In our case, you impeach him. But then, and this is more important, you set about reordering your society from top to bottom to make certain nothing like that ever happens again. So you purge the military. You suspend basic civil liberties. To emphasize the point, you send troops to the Capitol. You tear down the old. You destroy all vestiges of the past in order to save the future. That's what's going on now. But hold on. Before we remake America to prevent future genocide at the Capitol, maybe we should know a little bit more about the crime that occurred on January 6th, if only to understand the justification for overturning our lives permanently. What exactly did happen that day? Simple question. You may be surprised to learn how little we know even now. In fact, it's remarkable how many of the most basic questions remain unanswered more than a month after the fact. Let's start with the headline of the day. 5 Americans died on the Capitol grounds on January 6th. You've heard that. You hear it incessantly, including from Republican office holders. 5 dead. But that doesn't really tell you very much. It's the details, as always, that matter. Who were these people and how did they die? That's how you understand what actually happened. So with that in mind, here are the facts as of tonight. 4 of the 5 who died that day were Trump supporters. The 5th was a Capitol Hill police officer who apparently also supported Donald Trump. Why is this relevant? Of course, the political views of the deceased shouldn't matter. But unfortunately, in this case, they do. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many other elected Democrats claim the mob was coming for them that day. Yet the only recorded casualties on January 6th were people who voted for Donald Trump. The first among them was the 34-year-old woman from Georgia called Roseanne Boyland. Authorities first announced that Boyland died of a, quote, medical emergency. Later video footage suggested she may have accidentally been trampled by the crowd. We're still not sure. That's the best guess. The second casualty was 55-year-old Kevin Greeson. Greeson died of heart failure while talking to his wife on a cell phone outside the Capitol. Quote, Kevin had a history of high blood pressure, his wife later said, and in the midst of the excitement, he suffered a heart attack, end quote. The third was 50-year-old Benjamin Phillips of Ringtown, Pennsylvania. Phillips was a Trump supporter who organized a bus trip to Washington for the rally that day. He died of a stroke on the grounds of the Capitol. There is no evidence that Phillips rioted or was injured by rioters or even went inside the Capitol building. The fourth person to die, the only person to die that day of intentional violence, was 35-year-old Ashley Babbitt, a military veteran from San Diego. Babbitt was wearing a Trump cape when she was shot to death by a Capitol Hill police lieutenant. Babbitt's death was caught on video, so hers is the best documented death that took place that day. And yet it is surprising how little we know about it. Babbitt was shot as she tried to crawl through a broken window into the speaker's lobby within the Capitol. And that's essentially the extent of what we know. Authorities have refused to release the name of the man who shot her or divulge any details of the investigation they say they've done. We may never know exactly why this unnamed Capitol Hill police officer took her life. According to that officer's attorney, quote, there is no way to look at the evidence and think that he is anything but a hero. Of course, we can't actually look at that evidence because they're withholding it. We can't even know his identity. Killing an unarmed woman may be justified under certain specific circumstances. But since when is it, quote, heroic when the dead woman has read QAnon websites? Republicans aren't asking that question. One Republican member of Congress from Oklahoma says he immediately hugged the officer who shot Ashley Babbitt. You did what you had to do, the congressman said. But did the officer really have to do that? We don't know. It would be nice to know. Maybe someone could ask. We do know that Ashley Babbitt was not holding a weapon when she was killed. Nevertheless, at the impeachment hearing this week, Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island described what happened at the Capitol as, quote, an armed insurrection. Watch.
He incited an armed, angry mob to riot. On inciting an armed insurrection against the United States government, an armed, angry, and dangerous crowd armed violence against the government of the United States of America.
David Cicilline is a former mafia lawyer from Providence, so presumably he knows what it is to commit a felony with a firearm. Doubtless he does. There are no reports of rioters at the Capitol building that day discharging weapons or threatening anyone with a gun. So what exactly is David Cicilline talking about? Well, apparently he's referring to the death of Officer Brian Sicknick. In the hours after the riot, the New York Times reported that Trump supporters had brutally beaten Officer Sicknick to death with a fire extinguisher. The fire extinguisher, apparently, is the deadly weapon, the armed in the armed insurrection. Now, the news of Sicknick's death by violence was quickly picked up by countless other media outlets. Cable television anchors repeated and then amplified it.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the hours-long attack.
They beat a Capitol police officer to death with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
He died at the age of 42 after he was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher.
Capitol Hill police officer beaten to death with a fire extinguisher by a white supremacist mob. It's horrifying. And that is the story they were telling. It's a story they still are telling. That account forms the basis of
All
the
right,
myth
we'll
that
have
Democrats
a couple of more
constructed
minutes.
around
This is so critical to this country. The 5 were not killed by the mob.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
This is now a playbook. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. This is not something where they just are going to disassemble this. This is how they're going to do it from this point forward. So what are the big takeaways? Number one, the left is just now realizing how much power they really have over us. I think they're still learning how to use that power. Number two, the left is willing at almost all costs to sacrifice truth for power. Number three, persuasion means very little when the other side is actually concerned of how the election is going to be conducted. You know, we joked around throughout the the first couple weeks after early November, after the election. We said it doesn't matter how people vote; it matters who counts the votes. Remember, we joked about that. Well, they say here in Podhorser's presentations, winning the vote was only the first step to winning the election. After that came winning the count. Winning the count. Can you believe it? Not just what people think, but actually how the votes are counted. Winning the certification, winning the Electoral College, and winning the transition. This is now going to be how they will handle every single election from this point forward.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
You notice the figure 1.9 trillion just kind of rolls off the tongue. Now keep in mind, this is the administration that said they wanted to unify the country. There had to be healing. There's going to be bipartisanship. And you know it was all horsepeak. And did the same thing that the Obama administration did. The Obama administration came in. Remember all their health care plans? And the Republicans, Ryan wanted to meet him halfway and had all sorts of ideas. And Obama says, dude, we won the election. You lost. So we ran on Obamacare. And we're going to do Obamacare. So just sit down and watch how we work. Same thing here. Not a single Republican buying in on $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion used to sound like a lot of money. But you know who?
All right, my friends, we go back in a moment. I rarely do this, play something at an extended length, but his monologue was so filled with information. You keep hearing 5 dead, 5 killed, 5 dead. And it's very painful for me to say, there is no joy in me to say that truth is not a left-wing value, but it isn't. See, people on all parts of the spectrum lie, but only one part of the spectrum doesn't think lying is wrong, and that's the left. In the name of furthering their power, you can lie. In fact, you should lie. Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, a 3-year lie, as an example. The latest lie is 5 dead as a result of the mob entering the Capitol, including the fire extinguisher death, which I never reported to you. I didn't know if it actually happened. First of all, if the New York Times reports it, I'm always dubious, and it turns out for good reason in this case, as an example. They are the mouthpiece of the left. That is how journalists, quote unquote, at the New York Times see their role in life. It is not to, as dispassionately as possible, report truth. It is to further the cause of social justice as they understand it. That is the purpose of left-wing clergy. That is the purpose of left-wing journalists. That is the purpose of left-wing teachers. That is the purpose of left-wing late-night comedians. That is the purpose of left-wing athletes, is to further your agenda. So everything you do is subservient to furthering that agenda. That is why I have called it my entire life a substitute for religion. It is a secular religion. And secular religions in the modern age are far more fanatical than God-based religions. No religion, well, even including Islamic terrorism, no religion has come close in the modern era to extinguishing life as communism and Nazism, two secular movements. Never learned that at college, I'll bet, huh? Hey, boys and girls. Well, they can't say boys and girls anymore because that imputes a gender identity. Hey, humans. Did you ever think about the fact that the bigger the government, the more likely there is to be genocide? Really? Yeah. It's very hard, except actually, ironically, with the example of the Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda, that was not a big government massacre. That was a tribal massacre, which is why we have nationalism, so that we end tribalism. Do you know that Barry Weiss, former New York Times reporter, she showed a mailing sent out by, I will get you the name of the school, one of the most expensive schools, I think, in Los Angeles, that they will be telling parents there is separate hours for white parents to meet with faculty and black parents, and separate meetings for black faculty and white faculty. And this is called progressive. Get it? Imagine that. If you'd have shown this to a liberal 15 years ago, they would have said this is from the Old South. Yeah, it makes sense. White parents meet separately and black parents meet separately. As Barry Weiss asked, what happens to mixed race parents? I guess they go to both. That's cool. They really should have a third category like they did in South Africa. There was colored, European, and mixed. That's how it was called. I was there. One day I should tell you about that. Anyway, let's go back to Tucker Carlson here. And his description of the lie told by all the networks and the New York Times about the fire extinguisher death. And again, every one of those, none were killed, it turns out. Apparently none were killed, except for a Trump supporter climbing through a broken window. And why they're not releasing the name of the officer when it's the first thing they do when a police officer kills a black is proof of the corruption in our country. It is just, I have never spoken about America and corruption until I came to realize it, what the left has done to our institutions. They have corrupted every institution they have touched. And it makes sense when John Brennan was a communist and hasn't changed any of his views, just changed his title. That's just CIA. Let's continue with Tucker Carlson and the officer who reportedly was killed, smashed, bludgeoned by and with a fire extinguisher.
January 6th. Sicknick's remains lay in state at the Capitol building. Streams of politicians, the very same people who just months before had told us that cops were racist by definition, those same people praised Brian Sicknick as a hero. They had finally found a police officer who served their political uses. Kamala Harris and her husband, for example, arrived to pay their respects, and as they did, they said not one thing about defunding the police. But in fact, the story they told was a lie, from beginning to end. Officer Sicknick was not beaten to death, not with a fire extinguisher, not with anything else. According to an exhaustive and fascinating new analysis on Revolver News, there's no evidence that Brian Sicknick was hit with a fire extinguisher at any point during the day. None. No video, nothing. The officer's body apparently bore no signs of trauma. In fact, on the night of January 6th, long after rioters at the Capitol had been arrested or dispersed, Brian Sicknick texted his brother from his office. According to his brother, Sicknick said he'd been, quote, pepper sprayed twice and he was in good shape. 24 hours later, Officer Brian Sicknick was dead. How did Officer Sicknick die? The head of the Capitol Police Union has said he had a stroke, no cause given. More than that, we still don't know. Sicknick's body was cremated immediately. Authorities have refused to release his autopsy. No one has been charged in his death.
Why have authorities
pending.
Refused to release his autopsy? Because the Democrats are in charge in D.C. and they lie. They're corrupt. That's why. There is no other answer. Please continue.
No charges are pending. Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was tragic, obviously, but it was also very different from what they have told us. They have lied about how he died. They've lied about a lot. For example, how did this riot start? Was it a spontaneous event incited by a reckless president on his way out?
All right, we'll leave that for now. I just wanted you to hear about the 5. That's all they talk about. 5 died, 5 killed. We'll be back.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
This is Albert Mueller for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mueller.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
For an attorney, is there a job? Is there a job more important than this one? I mean, is it more prestigious? than to defend any president in a Senate impeachment trial. Bruce Castor, again, video cut 1, play cut.
House managers who spoke earlier were brilliant speakers. And I made some notes, and they'll hear about what I think about some of the things they said later when I'm closing the case. But I thought they were brilliant speakers, and I loved listening to them. And they were smart fellows.
Okay, I'm going to get preachy now. Don't ever, if you are in a setting, whether it's a high school debate club or the most important trial of the century, the second impeachment of a president who happens to have left office, don't sing the praises of the other team. How you love listening to them and how great they were. Unless, can you guess? Unless you're better than them. If you're going to crush them with your rhetoric, with your argument, with your evidence, with your style, with your tone, with your delivery, then you can do it. Then you can risk it. Even then, not advisable.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We already know that tech companies were interfering in the 2020 election significantly. Little did we know there was both private and public pressure to have the tech companies act as political referees to the benefit of Joe Biden and the Democrats. The most interfered with election in American history. Let me say that again. It was the most interfered with election in American history. From the private interests to the tech interests to the changing of how we do voting in this country, it was as if it was the first election in American history, because every election before it was done in completely different ways. But these tech companies have incredible influence over Congress. They give millions of dollars through lobbying and direct contributions to be able to dictate
My friends, I'm Dennis Prager, and I have in the studio a young woman, and when I mean young, I mean 20. Amala Ekpunobi, Ekpunobi. And the ID I have on my screen is she is an Instagram sensation. When I hear a 20-year-old woman is an Instagram sensation, my first thought is she was posing in some swimsuit. I don't know much about Instagram, but that's a pretty famous part of it. That's not the case here, and we're going to find out why she is. She's a Prager Force member. She is from Central Florida. Her father is Nigerian, and her mother is American white. And Amala, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Thank you for having me, Dennis.
It's a pleasure. So, your story is an important one, and I'd like you all to know that one of the reasons Amala is on is to give you hope. I am not despairing, okay? I do not in any way, as you all know, understate the crisis of this country. It is the greatest crisis since the Civil War, and it is the only one in the history of America since before 1776 to have such widespread suppression of speech. That was the one thing Americans took for granted. It was the sweet land of liberty. As I have said, given that the French socialists have objected to America's suppression of speech and woke culture, maybe they'll take the Statue of Liberty back. If they offered to, I think it would be a wake-up call to Americans about what the left is doing. In any event, we have Amala, and you your story, I only know a little. You grew up politically on the left, is that correct?
Yes.
So tell us about your mom.
So I was raised by a single mother. My parents divorced when I was around 6 years old, so I grew up with her influence, and she happens to be a fundraiser for a major left-leaning organization over in Central Florida. So she was my main influence growing up, and that's where I got all of my ideology and all of my beliefs, which happened to be socialist and atheist. So I grew up as a very angry liberal, if you would call it that, and I was very vocal about my beliefs, and of course I was spitting out socialist ideology to anybody who would listen to me, and I was so passionate about it that when I graduated high school at the age of 17, I started working for that organization as a youth organizer.
You used a magic word when you said angry. I say on almost a daily basis, there are happy and unhappy conservatives, happy and unhappy liberals, but all leftists are unhappy. Mm-hmm. I've also said that if you go to college or now high school, you get a degree in anger. Is that fair?
That is a very fair assessment across the board.
Was your mother angry? Is she angry?
My mother is very angry, unfortunately. Virtually on any topic that you can think of and bring up, there is always this air of anger to it, and I'm not sure why, but that seems to be the story on the left.
It does indeed. Before we learn about your eventual awakening, if I may use that term, mm-hmm. to the extent, and I'm not at all prying into your family life. I'm using this as really a macro issue, but I have a human being to tell her story. So if there's anything that's uncomfortable, don't hesitate not to answer.
Sure.
Do you know at all anything about your mother's upbringing?
So she was raised by my grandparents, who happened to be very conservative, and for most of her life, up until the point that she went to college, she was pretty conservative in lifestyle and in her beliefs, and she went to university in Charleston, and when she came out of university, life had changed, and she was no longer a conservative.
What years did she go to college?
Oh, I'm not too sure about the timeline there.
Well, when was she born? What year?
She was born, so right now she is 51 years old. So
51 from 2020 or 1970?
1970.
Okay, so she went to college, we would say, in the 80s.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Or even early 90s. Yeah. Right. So yes, by then, certainly, going to college meant an indoctrination in anger.
Absolutely.
So how did your grandparents react to her transformation?
My grandparents remain very neutral when it comes to politics. They don't like to assert themselves. When the topic is brought up, it's always a very bombastic argument about whatever issue is brought up, so we tend to avoid that at all costs in our family.
How long were your parents married?
My parents were married, I want to say, I'm not too sure how long they were married. My father wasn't really in my life that much. I have very few memories of him, and it's not something that we discuss.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with Amala Ekpunobi. And it is my joy, and it is a joy. It's in my pocket right now. I can crumple the wrapper for you. It's a Relief Factor. It is that good. And they have an interesting approach. It'll only take you 3 weeks to find out if it works, so they have a special price for 3 weeks of $19.95. That is at relieffactor.com for backaches, muscle ache, neck ache, knee ache. Relieffactor.com and 800-500-8384.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The reason that I am having trouble with the argument is the American people just spoke, and they just changed administrations. So in the light most favorable to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, their system works. The people are smart enough, in the light most favorable to them, they're smart enough to pick a new administration if they don't like the old one. And they just did. And he's down there, Pennsylvania Avenue now.
If you were wondering, that's not the White House legal counsel. Just in case you were wondering, that person, whether you say, oh, the American people are so wise they chose Joe Biden. Allegedly, that's Bruce Castor, who, according to reports, works for the 45th President of the United States. Why he spent time on that argument yesterday? Your job is not to praise the last election. It's to deal with the charge of incitement to insurrection. Now, I looked at this guy's bio. He has he was a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, put some very bad people away, including murderers. But what happened to him? Again, from yesterday, this is Bruce Castor talking about one of our founding fathers. Video cut 2. Play cut.
Paraphrasing the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, who, as a Philadelphian, I feel as though I can do that because he's my founding father, too.
He's my founding...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler is a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler.
Hello, my friends. I'm Dennis Prager. A remarkable young woman, 20 years old, Amala Ekpunobi. She's a member of Prager Force. She actually spoke to the board of directors of Prager University at a board meeting this week. And we're very, very happy we found you, and happy you found us. We'll get to that in a moment. So just to recap, Amala is the daughter of a Nigerian father and American white mother, and they separated when she was 6, and that's her. That's the personal story in a nutshell. Her mother was, as a result of college, she became a person of the left. So were you raised? You were raised on the left.
Absolutely.
Was there, when you were 15, was there a voice in you saying, is this all correct, or you pretty much believed it?
And when I was 15, I was completely indoctrinated by the left. You could not reach me if you jumped in my head and gave me your own ideas. And I was, like I said, extremely angry. Anybody who wanted to pick a fight with me, I was there to argue, and I was there to spout the talking points and the buzzwords.
Well, here's a question I don't know if you're asked often. Did you buy the line that being a person of color, you were persecuted?
Absolutely. And it was ingrained into me from a very young age, actually. So growing up with my mother,
you grew up thinking pretty much America is systemically racist.
Yes.
And had it in for you.
Yes, absolutely.
If I'd have asked you when you were 15, So how has America's systemic racism and the universality of white prejudice against blacks, how has that actually affected you? What would you have answered?
I would not have had an answer.
I don't think any of them, them meaning people of color who believe, the people of color on the left, people and whites on the left don't either.
Mm-hmm.
It's the greatest lie, and it's backed up with nothing. It's backed up with studies.
It is,
but not real life. It is somewhat of a you'll find this of interest, I think. I've been doing radio for 35 years, and I have a lot of black listeners, which I'm delighted to say. And every so often, I will get a call about, Dennis, you don't know what it is to walk in a black person's shoes. I don't know what it is to walk in my wife's shoes. I'm not being cute. No one knows what it's like to walk in anybody else's shoes. That's the human condition. The caller doesn't know what it's like to walk in my shoes. All right. So I say, okay, and if I walked in your shoes, what would I experience? Well, tell you the truth, every day I experience racism.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had an answer for 35 years, and it's an honest answer. Okay, if it happens every day, what happened today?
Mm.
And then they say, well, day's not over. Okay, what happened yesterday? Because yesterday is over. And I've never in 35 years gotten a response from someone claiming to experience racism every day. But you wouldn't have had an answer at 15.
I would not have had an answer. And it's funny enough, I grew up in a very conservative, mostly white area in Central Florida, and I was extremely successful. I was top of my class. I graduated valedictorian, and you still would have come up to me and asked me about it, and I would have said that America was systemically racist, even though I had not experienced any of it. And that's how corrupt our media is, that's how corrupt our schooling system is, and their influence is very strong, especially with young people.
God, I love her. I do. What am I going to tell you?
Thank you.
So, what happened? What did you wake up one day? Was there a theophany? Did you have a burning bush like Moses? What happened?
So what happened for me was I graduated at 17. I wasn't too keen on going straight into college, and I started working for my mother's organization as a youth organizer. And for me, my target audience was anybody from the age of 13 to 18, so I would travel around to schools and find their Democratic clubs or their left-leaning students, and I would talk to them about coming and working for the organization. And that involved going to our education seminars, getting involved with protests, going around and canvassing and door knocking, and I put myself in a position where I was a role model to young people, and they had plenty of questions for me, and they were questions that I could not answer. And I went to my superiors and I asked these questions, and I saw a lot of hate, and I got a lot of hate in return. So I had to go out and seek my own answers, and that's how I came to be a conservative.
Can you give an example? Do you remember what some of those questions might have been?
So a lot of it was, what can I do as a person to stop this racism? And can you give me examples of numbers and things like that that I can prove to people that this is happening in America? They wanted proof of what I was saying, that America is systemically racist, that we are oppressed, that we live in a patriarchal society. And I could not provide that proof to these young children.
Well, the left would give a standard answer, for example, the disproportionate number of blacks in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So would you have an answer to that? In other words, at 17, would that have been a convincing response that America is systemically racist?
At 17, that would have convinced me, hook, line, and sinker. I would have believed it.
Well, you're only 20, so we're talking about a recent change.
Yes.
So it was that you started asking questions?
Yes. So I experienced a lot of hate working for the left. I realized I was a very angry person. When I went into work each day, it felt like, okay, there are things you can and cannot say. We need to stick in that. You have to agree with everything on all sides of the spectrum or you're not with us. And there was a lot of hate, particularly for white people. And I had spoken with a supervisor and I said, I'm half white. Am I supposed to hate that half of me? Am I supposed to hate the family?
Okay, so let me just say the day you asked that, it was over.
Yes.
That is why they don't want 5-minute videos.
Yep.
It doesn't take long to burst the leftist bubble.
Yep.
We'll be back in a moment with Amala Ekpunobi.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Joe Biden gave a really nice speech on January the 20th, talking about healing the nation and unity, and appears to be doing none of that during his early time in office.
What do you think is the biggest flaw in the $1.9 trillion proposal, Senator?
Well, it's just not necessary. Only about 20% of the money that we appropriated in December has even been spent, Hugh. And you can't tell me that a $15 minimum wage is part of a COVID-19 relief package. And it's not as if the economy really needs more stimulus, because we're growing at a rate of about 4% a year, pretty good clip. In other words, what we've done before has helped, and the American economy, as resilient as it is coming back. But we do need targeted relief. We need to deploy the vaccine to make sure we get as many shots in arms as we possibly can. And we need to get kids safely back to school. And, of course, we're all watching the battle between the teachers' unions and parents about what's happening to our children, which is really tragic.
Now, there is also the problem that of the, I believe, total $5 trillion at the end of the Biden rescue package, it might be more. None of that money will have gone to defense, Senator Cornyn. So no. We will have done the most incredible thing ever. We will have increased the debt to $28 or $29 trillion, and we will not have bought a bullet. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is nothing to do with national security or defense, and it's all about domestic spending and spending money we don't have, as you point out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline, USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving riot. And then the vote was taken, 56-44. 6 Republicans joined with the Democrats in claiming that this show trial, this snap impeachment, is constitutional. Bill Cassidy, for some reason, out of the clear blue, last week he's on TV saying, oh, it's a show trial, doesn't mean anything, it's unconstitutional. But because he didn't like the performance of the president's lawyers yesterday, somehow he decided to vote suddenly that it was constitutional. But then again, that brings you to 6 Republicans, which means you're far short from the 17 Republican threshold to get a conviction. They've given away the ending. The vote yesterday.
Amala Ekpunobi is here. She is 20 years old. She's with Prager Force, father Nigerian, mother white American, raised a leftist. So we don't have a lot of time. I wish we did, actually. And we'll have to do a part 2. But I said to you, the moment you asked, do I have to hate the white part of myself? I said that's over for the left.
Yep.
So is there a date? Is there a moment? What happened?
There was multiple moments that I sort of fought back against in my mind and tried to reassert myself as a leftist, and it just did not work for me in the end. So that conversation went very poorly. It was not received well. That question was not received well, and I essentially got the response that I needed to understand that people were angry and that they had a right to be angry. And yes, that did apply to my white family.
And there's something wrong with you if you're not angry.
Yes.
That's really important. So when did you discover whatever you discovered that was not leftist, intellectually?
It was a long road for me. So when those questions were not well received, I sort of went and did my own research to try to answer them. And I found PragerU, I found Thomas Sowell, I found Larry Elder, I found Michael Knowles, and I started falling down this rabbit hole of going through all these conservative videos where they were going through all the leftist talking points and debunking them one after the other. And you couldn't have convinced me any better than that. I knew I was doing the wrong thing.
It's a pretty good diet. PragerU, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell, and Michael Knowles, yes. I must say. It's an all-star team. No, I know them well. They're in my life. I'm in their lives. And that makes sense. So how has that affected your relations with your mother?
We steer clear from politics, and she knows what I'm doing now, and she knows that I'm spouting conservative ideology and trying to influence people, and she's not happy about it. She sort of told me before I left for this trip out to LA that I'm glad that you're using your powers. I'm proud of you that you're chasing your dreams, but I wish you were doing it for good instead of evil.
Wow. I wish I could meet your mom. Tell your mom, by the way, she has a standing invitation to come on my show.
Okay.
I'm very serious.
I'm sure she'll take you up.
Good, because very few people on the left do, and I promise you I will treat her very civilly.
I'm sure.
And my first question would be, what do we spout that's evil? I'd be very interested to know. Turns out we're nice people, isn't that right?
Very nice people.
Yeah.
And it amazed me at the time.
I'm sure it did. Well, we are delighted to have you at PragerU and in the better part of the country.
Thank you so much.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
So you're Donald Trump, and it appears you lost the election. But you're hanging by a thread there's a shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a speech, an incendiary speech. I'm going to make a whole bunch of my supporters go insane, go berserk. I'll send them to the Capitol building. They'll trash the place. The Democrats will go, oh my goodness, I guess Donald Trump is really, really serious about believing the election was stolen. Maybe we should take a look at this. We take another look at it. The evidence is overwhelming. The election was stolen. Let's have him stay there 4 more years. Really? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll send a whole bunch of my supporters. I'll trash the place, put a lot of negative footage up there, and Americans are going to go, you know what? If this man doesn't get 4 more years, he'll burn the whole country down, so let's keep him there. Really? You think that looked good for him? You think that advanced his agenda? Think having that little idiot with the Viking hat help Donald Trump 4 more years down the road? And the story came out, says the guy's sorry. Said I should have been better dressed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about this. It was very serious and very scary. And people died and people got injured. And Donald Trump wanted that? He was hoping it would happen? Really? That's how much you hate this guy?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
I will not be persuaded where Justice Story wasn't persuaded and where the framers weren't persuaded that they really meant this and they just left it out. I mean, has anyone come up and approached you with an argument yet that is even remotely plausible other than political?
Well, that's a new way to interpret the Constitution. It's what they left out, not what they put in. No, I mean this is a made-up process. If this were the impeachment of a president, as you know, it required the Chief Justice to preside. And now we've got Senator Leahy, who will be the presiding officer. Presumably he'll still act as a juror. Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan, said, well, we're all victims. And then I assume we're all witnesses, too. This is Anglo-American jurisprudence turned on its head.
Well, I have played your quote today because I think it's important that condemnation of a pseudo-constitutional process not be confused with applause for what happened on January 6th. I believe the president was reckless that day, but that doesn't change the Constitution. And do your colleagues across the aisle acknowledge this at all?
No, this is a political process. And, Hamilton said as much in Federalist 65, as much as we try to analogize this to a legal proceeding in a court of law. It's unique, but it's clear that this is part of a continuum. A lot of the same impeachment managers served on the Judiciary Committee that tried President Trump a year ago. And so this has just been a continuum ever since he was sworn into office.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
But if you have Republicans who themselves are unwilling to push back, I mean, let's call them what they are. They're cowards.
And the magic word there is primary. Let Representative Glatsky know that if he doesn't stand up for internet freedom, that you will find a candidate to run against him who will. Inter-party competition. Now, some have spoken of the need for a new political party because they're so disgusted by the inside the Beltway country club Republican sellouts. That would be a tragic mistake. I just wrote a piece for The Spectator explaining why we don't need a new party. There are a number of legal barriers to a new party because the laws regarding ballot access were written by Republicans and Democrats working together. Your candidate will never get into the presidential debates as sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is not a commission. It's not appointed by the president. And it's most certainly not about debate. If so, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party candidates should have been in the last debate. They were on the ballot.
Hello, my friends. I'm Dennis Prager, and the farce upon farce is continuing. There was no insurrection, and there was no president. They're impeaching a non-president over an event that didn't occur. Of course, the riot occurred, but it wasn't an insurrection. And if it wasn't an insurrection, why is there a trial? So it's based on a great lie. I played for you the first hour. Tucker Carlson on Fox News did research into the 5 killed or dead. That's what they always say, 5 dead. None of them were killed, except one by a police officer whom they will not name. And we don't know why she was killed. She was unarmed and entering the building through a window, which was wrong. But that's not a capital offense to enter a window unarmed. So it's interesting, to say the least. We're living in a make-believe world, the make-believe world that the left creates, of hysteria after hysteria. You realize that the lockdown is only a prelude to further lockdowns in different manners with regard to global warming. After all, how can we possibly allow people to pollute the world and create an existential crisis of survival, which is what the left says is at stake, survival of humanity? It's an interesting question, is it not? What will they do after this? Now that they learned that the American people are prepared to accept complete curtailment of their civil rights, not to mention curtailment of free speech, in the name of virus and the second in the name of anti-racism, there's really no limit to the ability to control the American people. Half of the American people accept draconian limitations on their freedoms. I can't tell you how sad I am about that, because I did, even though I wrote a book on happiness in which there was a chapter about limiting your expectations, I did expect better from the American people. I was naive. I admit it. I didn't think Americans would take the curtailment of their civil liberties. Don't leave your house with the ease with which they have accepted it. Don't send your children to school. Okay, no prob. Right? Isn't that how most Americans have reacted? Most Americans probably support not sending their kids to school. There's a new term, I love it. Remember the first one was better safe than sorry? Guess what? You know what the new term is? It's related, but it's a new term. Abundance of caution. Notice what that is? AOC. There you go. We have AOC twice now. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And abundance of caution. That's it. We need an abundance of caution. I think we need an abundance of liberty. We need an abundance of ivermectin. This is the state of America at this time, the willingness to lose one's liberty, the ease with which it has been done for a year. We're approaching a year now. It's mid-February. When did the lockdown start? First week of March? Is that what? So it's approaching a year. Remember when Ezekiel Emanuel said we got to stay in lockdown until there's a vaccine? Maybe a year and a half. And I thought, this is a madman. He is a madman. But he turned out right. That's what we're doing. Yep. Can't board an airplane. What will be the new rule? So here's the amazing thing. So you have to test negative before boarding an airplane, even though we have zero evidence that airplanes are spreading the virus. Zero. Are flight attendants dying like flies? Are they dying like non-flies? No. So if you test negative as you board the plane, why do you have to wear a mask when you're on the plane? Do you have an answer to that? I'm not kidding. Can you come up with an answer? Or is that an abundance of caution? AOC, abundance of caution. And then the acceptance of the limitations on free speech in this country. This Disney actress. So, have you followed this Disney actress? Are you familiar with what I'm referring to? I was not familiar with her until this. But she's somewhat of a star, and they fired her completely. She's now radiation. She now emits a radiating glow, so she can't be touched. So is this the one that we're talking about here? Gina Carano. I'm going to read it. This is from the Wrap, dropped from the Mandalorian after, quote, abhorrent social media posts. Gina Carano has been dropped from the Mandalorian after the actress posted comments Lucasfilm said it considers abhorrent. The former MMA fighter played Cara Dune on the series for the first 2 seasons of the hit Disney show. Gina Carano is not currently employed by Lucasfilm, and there are no plans for her to be in the future. Nevertheless, her social media posts denigrating people based on their cultural and religious identities are abhorrent and unacceptable, said a Lucasfilm spokesperson. You notice that they never tell you what they actually are? So she denigrated people based on their cultural and religious identities? I read the tweets. Did you see how people were belittled on the basis of their... So is Lucasfilm lying? Of course Lucasfilm is lying. Because truth isn't a left-wing value. Suppression of liberty is. Carano came under fire on Wednesday as the hashtag Fire Gina Carano trended over an Instagram post comparing being Republican today to being Jewish during Nazi Germany. Quote, Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that in any way different from hating someone for their political views, wrote Carano. So who was belittled? I'm a Jew, and I bet I know 100 times more about anti-Semitism, Judaism, and the Holocaust than anybody at Lucasfilms. I'll bet I've done more for the Jewish people than anybody at Lucasfilms. So how come I'm not offended? Why would Jews be offended? Why? No, not only why. It's right. Why? Not only why would Jews be offended? She is actually speaking of something that is being suppressed in our woke high schools. They don't teach about the Holocaust. What? So you may disagree. You can say we don't agree. The government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? So you may say, oh, it's very different hating somebody for their race or ethnicity or religion than hating them for their political views. Well, among those that Hitler began with were communists. He hated communists for their political views. Is that something worth noting? Is that all that different? What was the old statement? First they came for communists, that I wasn't a communist, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for union leaders, and I wasn't a union leader, and so on. Then they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew. Isn't that the whole point of that? First they came for people for their political identities, then they came for the Jews. This is cited by people on the left all the time. Pastor Niemöller's statement. It is the most famous statement to come out of Nazi Germany. The famous first they came for. First they came for people based on their political views, then they came for the Jews.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The reason that I am having trouble with the argument is the American people just spoke, and they just changed administrations. So in the light most favorable to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, their system works. The people are smart enough, in the light most favorable to them, they're smart enough to pick a new administration if they don't like the old one. And they just did. And he's down there, Pennsylvania Avenue now.
If you were wondering, that's not the White House legal counsel. Just in case you were wondering. That person, whether you say, oh, the American people are so wise they chose Joe Biden. Allegedly, that's Bruce Castor, who, according to reports, works for the 45th President of the United States. Why he spent time on that argument yesterday? Your job is not to praise the last election, it's to deal with the charge of incitement to insurrection. Now, I looked at this guy's bio. He has he was a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, put some very bad people away, including murderers. But what happened to him? Again, from yesterday, this is Bruce Castor talking about one of our founding fathers. Video cut 2. Play cut.
Paraphrasing the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, who, as a Philadelphian, I feel as though I can do that because he's my founding father too.
He's my founding.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler's a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't.
Hey, I'd like to remind you that rates are at an all-time, if not all-time, close to all-time low. And I have had two guys at Sierra Pacific Mortgage who have been with me, now it's a year, from the very beginning of the lockdown. They are Andrew and Todd at andrewandtodd.com. And if you are considering a refi, a new purchase, a cash-out refi, or a reverse mortgage, I strongly, strongly recommend these gentlemen who are very devoted to their work and very devoted to their customers. I get very lovely letters about them, their competence and their decency. Go to andrewandtodd.com at 888-888-1172. Well, it's either one or the other. You can. It's not at andrewandtodd.com. It'll 888-888-1172 is the number, and andrewandtodd.com is the website. You should definitely engage in a refinance or whatever with these people, and do it as soon as possible because of the rates being so extraordinarily low. andrewandtodd.com. I'm Dennis Prager. And this actress has been removed by Lucasfilms and Disney. There's nothing wrong with her tweet. To call this tweet anti-Semitic is to cheapen anti-Semitism. The ADL is on the left, so they'll never condemn Disney for calling this an anti-Semitic tweet. Did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Could you give Ellen the microphone?
I think we have to just be clear here that what is this woman's career has been wiped out. She was dropped by her talent agency, one of the major talent agencies in Hollywood. She's been canceled everywhere. She's a non-person in Hollywood. She cannot get a job anywhere because of one tweet. Her career is over.
And there was nothing wrong with it.
And there was nothing wrong with it. Some people complained. The Twitter mob complained, and Lucasfilm swallowed it whole.
Because they're cowards.
They're all
is the
cowards.
Yes, they're all cowards. And the same with, what is it, CAA? Who was her
It was UTA,
agency?
which is
UTA.
a major agency. What is to stop these people? This is what I do not understand. What is to stop these people from saying, yeah, we got the complaint, we hear it, fine, thank you, see you later, bye, talk to you another time.
Right, there's no merit to your complaint. You're not allowed to say that. There's only no merit to conservatives' complaints. This is what they've done. We're living in a reign of terror, ladies and gentlemen. It is not physical terror. It is vocational terror. It is livelihood terror. It is reputation terror. But it's a reign of terror. It unlike any, including, it dwarfs McCarthyism. Dwarfs it. We have never had this because the left is despicable everywhere it gains power. It makes decent people disgusting. It is transformative leftism. People at Lucasfilms who perhaps 10 years ago would have said, so what? This is this woman's opinion. Today, fire her. Leftism makes people worse. Remember, it destroys everything it touches. That includes human decency.
Again, I just want to make this point crystal clear. She was not fired. Fired does not cover it. She's been wiped out. She
that's
cannot.
Fair.
If you're fired, you can get a job somewhere else. She has no chance of getting a job anywhere else in Hollywood as a result of this. That's different.
Another Instagram story post showed someone with several masks covering their entire face with the caption, "Meanwhile in California." So what is wrong with that? You can't differ with the left on anything, whether it's masks or the shutdown of people hating them for their political views. The Jews who object to what she said need to make their case. I would love any prominent Jew who thinks that this is anti-Semitic. You're invited onto my show, since the odds are I know a lot more about Judaism and anti-Semitism than you do. Beware that you're entering an intellectually dangerous space, but I will treat you with utter civility. You tell me why it is anti-Semitic to say that just as the Nazis taught neighbors to hate neighbors, so too we're learning today to hate our neighbor because of their political views. Didn't they hate the communists for their political views? But as I pointed out, the statement of Pastor Niemöller is always raised. First they came for the socialists or the communists, then they came for this group, then they came for that group, then they came for the Jews. Then she has a caption of someone with several masks. Carano spent much of 2020 sharing some particularly obnoxious political cartoons. What is the rap? Is it on the left?
Yeah, it's an industry publication.
No, an industry publication. Okay. Particularly obnoxious political opinions on social media, including what looked a lot like support for baseless conspiracy theories and lies about non-existent voter fraud in states that went for Joe Biden. Do they consider obnoxious all the people who tweeted on Russian collusion with the Trump campaign? Did the rap ever use the term obnoxious to describe those tweets? Yeah, I'll bet you they didn't. And only 9 days after she invited people to join her on Parler, the social media platform preferred by right-wing extremists, the way they define it, no. Parler was preferred. It might have been a right-wing extremist who preferred it. That's true. So left-wing extremists prefer Google and YouTube and Instagram. Is that fair to say? Oh, writers at the Wrap?
This is a news report.
I know. This is exactly right. This is, yes, I know.
Obnoxious.
No, but they're so, there is no self-awareness on the left. Gee, do we do the same thing? No. Parler was created because there is no space for vast numbers of people who differ with the left. That's it. It is not created for right-wing extremists. It's created for dissent. The left does not allow for dissent. Many fans pretty much turned on her for reasons we probably don't need to explain. You're right. This is a news piece, right? Perhaps as a result, Carano didn't really say much else about politics for the rest of November, and the uproar died down a little bit. But then, in December, again, while people still assumed that an announcement of a Cara Dune show was inevitable, she waded back into it with a tweet that used the topic of a COVID-19 vaccine. We'll be back.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy, that was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day one of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
So you're Donald Trump, and it appears you lost the election. But you're hanging by a thread. There's a shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a speech, an incendiary speech. I'm going to make a whole bunch of my supporters go insane, go berserk. I'll send them to the Capitol building. They'll trash the place. The Democrats will go, oh my goodness, I guess Donald Trump is really, really serious about believing the election was stolen. Maybe we should take a look at this. We take another look at it. The evidence is overwhelming. The election was stolen. Let's have him stay there 4 more years. Really? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll send a whole bunch of my supporters. I'll trash the place, put a lot of negative footage up there, and Americans are going to go, you know what? If this man doesn't get 4 more years, he'll burn the whole country down, so let's keep him there. Really? You think that looked good for him? You think that advanced his agenda? Think having that little idiot with the Viking hat help Donald Trump 4 more years down the road? And the story came out, says the guy's sorry. Said I should have been better dressed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about this. It was very serious and very scary. And people died and people got injured. And Donald Trump wanted that? He was hoping it would happen? Really? That's how much you hate this guy?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
I will not be persuaded where Justice Story wasn't persuaded and where the framers weren't persuaded that
You know, I would ask you to suspend your subscription or cancel your subscription to, was it Disney Plus? Yeah. But I fully acknowledge that the behavior of big corporations, the cowardice that defines them, combined with leftism is a form of cowardice, makes it difficult to support any corporation at this time. It's a neo-fascistic movement here. The collusion of big business and ideological extremes. It's very, also somewhat unprecedented. So I'm reading to you about this actress, Gina Carano. So far I have not encountered what renders her unhireable. What is so terrible about what she has said? Let's see, what else did she do? Let's see, she waded back into it with a tweet that used the topic of COVID-19 vaccine to suggest mail-in voting cannot be trusted. So if you say you don't trust mail-in voting, you should not have a livelihood? One day, a certain percentage of people wake up to realize the left is evil. And until that day, the prognosis for this country is dim. That's all it takes. You wake up one day and go, whoa, I really like liberty. And that's the day you leave the left. You want to say in a tweet that mail-in voting cannot be trusted? Okay, why not? The old liberal response to statements that are wrong was to make statements that are right. You fight what you consider bad ideas with good ideas, but the left doesn't do that and never did. They fight ideas they differ with by either killing or fully suppressing the persons who made those statements. At last year's Disney's investor call, the company announced a Mandalorian spin-off show called Star Wars Rangers of the New Republic, which could have potentially starred Carano. That's how it ends? I guess that's how it ends. I think we should invite her on the show. Sure. See, I know when I ask you to speak out that the reign of terror in which we live, and it is a reign of terror. It doesn't mean that you go to the gulag and work to death. There could be a reign of terror, losing your livelihood, your reputation, your access to others. That's pretty bad. It's not death, but it's the death of your ability to function as a citizen in the society. I didn't know this woman from Adam, but my heart breaks for her. God, are they mean on the left? Wow, it's defined by meanness. People are simply nicer. Conservatives are simply nicer human beings than leftists. Liberals are mixed. Conservatives are mixed. Leftists are vile. Because leftism makes you vile. You can't be tolerant and a leftist. You can be tolerant and a liberal. Well, that's her story. I repeat what Tucker Carlson said about January 6th. None of the 5 were killed by the mob that went into the Capitol. Not one of the 5. And are they still repeating that the officer who was placed in state, he lay in state?
We're going to confirm this, but apparently Ted Lieu said that Officer Sicknick was murdered. We will confirm.
Said it now?
Yeah.
Ted Lieu said he was murdered?
We will confirm.
All right, we will confirm it. Okay, fair enough. What did you just say, Sean? I'm going to take your calls when we come back. Yes. See, it's a real problem. When I give you the name of a big company that has made America worse, egregiously worse, like Disney with Lucasfilms, what's left for you to see? I mean, I understand that. Netflix did not allow no safe spaces to be, what's the word again? Streamed. Yeah, right. Well, I got good news for those of you with tingling and pins and needles type feelings somewhere in your body, hands and feet most particularly. I had it for much of my life in my feet due to what was called neuromas. Did a whole bunch of things. Some things did help, in fact. Big help was putting inserts in my shoes to get the bone off the nerve. I read about Nerve Renew, and about 10 months later, I threw away the inserts. I haven't worn them since. Nerve Renew is a 1-year money-back guarantee. NerveRenew.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Joe Biden gave a really nice speech on January the 20th, talking about healing the nation and unity, and appears to be doing none of that during his early time in office.
What do you think is the biggest flaw in the $1.9 trillion proposal, Senator?
Well, it's just not necessary. Only about 20% of the money that we appropriated in December has even been spent, Hugh. And you can't tell me that a $15 minimum wage is part of a COVID-19 relief package. And it's not as if the economy really needs more stimulus, because we're growing at a rate of about 4% a year, pretty good clip. In other words, what we've done before has helped, and the American economy, as resilient as it is coming back. But we do need targeted relief. We need to deploy the vaccine to make sure we get as many shots in arms as we possibly can. And we need to get kids safely back to school. And, of course, we're all watching the battle between the teachers' unions and parents about what's happening to our children, which is really tragic.
Now, there is also the problem that of the, I believe, total $5 trillion at the end of the Biden rescue package, it might be more. None of that money will have gone to defense, Senator Cornyn. So we will have done the most incredible thing ever. We will have increased the debt to $28 or $29 trillion, and we will not have bought a bullet. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is nothing to do with national security or defense, and it's all about domestic spending and spending money we don't have, as you point out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline in USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving riot. And then the vote was taken, 56-44. 6 Republicans joined with the Democrats in claiming that this show trial, this snap impeachment, is constitutional. Bill Cassidy, for some reason, out of the clear blue, last week he's on TV saying, oh, it's a show trial, doesn't mean anything, it's unconstitutional. But because he didn't like the performance of the president's lawyers yesterday, somehow he decided to vote suddenly that it was constitutional. But then again, that brings you to 6 Republicans, which means you're far short from the 17 Republican threshold to get a conviction. They've given
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. I want to remind you about the cruise that we're planning to take at the end of June, London to Iceland, and that's our plan. Can't predict what England will do, but obviously, if it doesn't go, you get a refund. That's clear. So these are phenomenal trips, my cruises with listeners. They all sell out, and I can't think of a time people would not rather go than now. Would rather go than now. All right. The banner is up at DennisPrager.com. All right, let's go to San Diego and David. Hello, David.
Morning.
Hi.
It's an honor to speak with you, Dennis.
Thank you.
I know how much accuracy is important to you, so I feel like I should call your attention to an error that you and pretty much everyone else that I hear talking about it are repeating. I Googled the numbers, 239 million eligible U.S. voters, 158 million voted. 81, let's call it 80 million, did not vote. And I believe you're saying for conversational expedience, basically, half the country believes, half of America feels. You're ignoring 80 million people.
Wait, so you think that I'm understating or overstating?
I think you're overstating. I think.
So you think
you're
of the 80
understating
million that didn't vote, you don't think it's 50-50 politically. You think it's
Correct.
it's
Correct.
there are
It's a third.
far more people on the left.
Yeah, and I feel that it leads to a bigger issue, which is the basically ignoring whoever voted for Clinton in 2016 voted for Biden. Whoever voted for Trump in 2016 voted for him in 2020. But 80 million people didn't vote. How are
Right.
those
So
people
why do you
ignored?
assume that they are not divided like the voters are?
I'm not saying that.
Yes,
Okay,
you are.
possibly
If you're not
they
saying that,
are,
all
but
right,
what I'm
forgive me.
saying
If
is-
you're not saying, why did you call?
Well, if they're being ignored.
I don't know what that
You
means,
can't
being
own-
ignored.
You can't
all
own
right.
40 million. I'm just saying you need to explain it a little more.
I don't know what there is to explain. Forgive me. I know you mean well. I have no idea what the point you're making. The country is divided 50-50 because I assume that the 80 million who didn't vote are as divided as the 160 million or 150 million that did vote. That's it. That's my assumption. It's a totally logical assumption to make. Okay, thank you, though. Let's go to another person who doesn't fully agree. Stockton, California. Mark, hello.
Hi, Dennis. I disagree with your position on that lady trying to enter the Congress room. She was going into a barricaded room to which she had no privilege or authority.
Agreed.
It was a forcible entry.
Agreed.
And my point.
Well,
just
why
two
did?
words.
Wait, did I say anything different than you did?
I thought you were saying that that the officer was wrong in using force.
That's what it
prevent
would
her
seem
entry.
to me. Breaking into a room unarmed is not generally met with death.
This is a service person. I'm sure she went through boot camp. They teach people about satchel charges. There weren't pipe bombs around in the place. She had no right to enter that room.
She had no right to enter
she had
that
no
room.
authorization.
I agree with you. You're not responding to my point. I fully agree with you. She had no right to enter the room. That is entirely accurate.
Okay.
I just don't know if the death penalty is the proper response to entering a room you don't have a right to enter.
Well, you have to look at this objectively. You can't just subjectively say in your mind, if you're an officer that has an obligation to protect that room,
That you shoot
maybe
people
she
who
has
enter?
innocent purpose.
Okay, so that's why it is worthy of an investigation. Somebody died doing something wrong. If we killed everybody doing something wrong, there would be very few Americans left. I'm overstating the case, obviously. But she didn't come in armed. If she came in armed through a window, I wouldn't have said what I said. Okay, so I hope I explained that. Jamal in Akron, Ohio. Hello.
Oh, hello, Dennis.
Hi.
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay.
I do.
Well, sir, I'm really kind of upset because I've been watching things going on, and I spend quite a bit of my time. First of all, I'm 51, I'm black, and there's some bad information out there. I followed your lead on the ivermectin and the Dr. Corey that was scrubbed from the internet, or at least from YouTube. And in that process of doing research on how to find it locally, I found this article in the New York Times that says that a doctor died after taking the vaccine. And
therefore,
so I'm wondering, well, I don't know where we go from here.
Well, there's nowhere to go. There are people who die from every vaccine. there's no such thing as nobody dying from a vaccine. Life consists in every way. There are people who die driving to work. So we don't conclude anything about driving to work and its dangers because people die driving to work. Just today, 5 people were killed on a Dallas-Fort Worth or a Fort Worth highway because of sleet and icy conditions. So what is one? I tell you this, I mean, having grown up in the Northeast and driving on ice, I don't know if this was ice specifically, but in any event, driving on ice is extremely hazardous. Nevertheless, people do, and people take vaccines, so I don't think we can draw any conclusions from that.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
But if you have Republicans who themselves are unwilling to push back, I mean, let's call them what they are. They're cowards.
And the magic word there is primary. Let Representative Glatsky know that if he doesn't stand up for internet freedom, that you will find a candidate to run against him who will. Inter-party competition. Now, some have spoken of the need for a new political party because they're so disgusted by the inside the Beltway country club Republican sellouts. That would be a tragic mistake. I just wrote a piece for The Spectator explaining why we don't need a new party. There are a number of legal barriers to a new party because the laws regarding ballot access were written by Republicans and Democrats working together. Your candidate will never get into the presidential debates as sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is not a commission. It's not appointed by the president, and it's most certainly not about debate. If so, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party candidates should have been in the last debate. They were on the ballot in enough states to theoretically get 270 electoral votes. Yet another obstacle to a new party. The other problem you have is that the lamest Republican in America, the lamest Republican nominee begins with 35% of the vote. The lamest Democrat nominee in America begins with somewhere between 38 and 40% of the vote. And then you build from there. Running in a new party, you start at 0.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mueller for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mueller.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more.
Hey, my friends, Dennis Prager here. Just remember, the 5 people who died in the mob entrance into the Capitol, none of them were killed by the mob. They were all Trump supporters, in fact. even the officer who was not killed by a fire extinguisher, by the way. How many Americans know that the officer was not killed by a fire extinguisher or any blunt object? 2%? 10%? Has that been reported? I ask you every day, has that been reported in the New York Times? They're the ones who lied to begin with. Oh, they didn't lie. I take it back. They said according to 2 officers whom they didn't name. The New York Times usage of anonymous sources goes back many decades. So we can't check on anything. It's beautiful. Philip, Greenville, South Carolina. Hello.
Hey, how you doing today? Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, I know we're talking about Gina Carano that was fired from Disney Plus for Twitter comments and everything like that. She actually started out her career as a UFC fighter, or it was before UFC,
right, I know that,
as an MMA fighter.
Right.
Maybe if we can get her on the show, maybe ask her about her thoughts about transgenders and women's sports as well.
I agree with you, and we are going to try to get her on. I would love to. I assume she might live in Southern California, no? Because that's where they make the movies. So that would be great. I'd like to have her in studio. Yes, I'm aware she was MMA and UFC. I do know that. The crushing of human beings for views that the left doesn't like. This is an unprecedented evil in American history. And if you don't find it evil, either you're a leftist or a naive liberal. One of the great dividing lines between the conservatives and the liberals, not conservatives and left goes without saying, conservatives and liberals, is that conservatives are prepared to declare the left a threat to this country and to Western civilization, and the liberals are not. Liberals have conservative values, conservatives have liberal values. But conservatives are prepared to declare the left the threat, the mortal existential threat that it poses to everything people like me hold precious, like liberty. That's the conservative-liberal divide, not on what they value, but what they are prepared to confront.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The reason that I am having trouble with the argument is the American people just spoke, and they just changed administrations. So in the light most favorable to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, their system works. The people are smart enough, in the light most favorable to them, they're smart enough to pick a new administration if they don't like the old one. And they just did. And he's down there, Pennsylvania Avenue now.
If you were wondering, that's not the White House legal counsel. Just in case you were wondering. That person, whether you say, oh, the American people are so wise they chose Joe Biden. Allegedly, that's Bruce Castor, who, according to reports, works for the 45th President of the United States. Why he spent time on that argument yesterday? Your job is not to praise the last election. It's to deal with the charge of incitement to insurrection. Now, I looked at this guy's bio. He has he was a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, put some very bad people away, including murderers. But what happened to him? Again, from yesterday. This is Bruce Castor talking about one of our founding fathers. Video cut 2. Play cut.
Paraphrasing the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, who, as a Philadelphian, I feel as though I can do that because he's my founding father too.
He's my founding.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler's a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler. They are even alleging that possibly Parler was bribing Trump because they wanted to give him a part of the company while he was president or after he was president. They were having the conversation. However, new information now shows that Facebook, not Parler, played the largest role in the Capitol Hill riot. New data from the American Department of Justice shows that despite the media and big tech campaign against Parler, it was Facebook which served as the top rallying point for those storming the Capitol building on January the 6th, Forbes reports. This is The Post-Millennial by Noah David Alter Toronto.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Hello, my friends. I'm Dennis Prager. And I'm going to go to a man I have great respect for, Steve Cortez, formerly of CNN, formerly of the Trump White House, and currently a colleague of mine on 560 AM, The Answer in Chicago, WIND. I'm coming out for cigar night, I think, was it in April? Coming out for my annual cigar night for the station, Steve. I hope I'll see you then. Do you smoke cigars?
Of course I do. If you remember, you accused me of being a cigar moil because I do a straight cut.
Oh, that's right. I did accuse you of that. I remember. This is Steve Cortez, who, to the best of my knowledge, is not Jewish and yet knows the word for circumciser in Hebrew. Right. That's impressive. How many Gentiles know the word for circumciser in Hebrew? It's a riddle.
Right. No, I'm a Catholic boy, but have a lot of dear Jewish friends and have been to plenty of circumcision, so I know the term moil. And you accuse me of that. I prefer a straight cut of the cigar, but however we cut the cigars, having them with you is always a treat and one that I anticipate.
You're a solid man. I really am a big fan of yours, as you know. So now I have a number of questions with regards to the impeachment trial. One is, you are on record as advocating that they do, in fact, in the defense, make the case for why a sober, rational human might believe there was voter fraud. Is that correct?
Correct. I have been strenuously arguing with Team Trump and advocating to former President Trump and others on his team. So far, I will say unsuccessfully so, to be quite honest, Dennis. But I've been arguing that, look, the Democrats included in this sham impeachment, in this resolution, not just the ridiculous charge that he incited violence, but they also put in there the allegation that he made, quote, false statements regarding the November 3rd vote. Well, if those are false statements, if that is the accusation, he has every right to then litigate that charge in a trial-like setting before the American people. And I think not only is it important for him, I think it's important for the country, because I think in so many ways, Dennis, this conversation has been ignored by corporate media. It has been actively suppressed by big tech. And so what we've had are people in their respective echo chambers sort of shouting about it, those of us who believe there are material problems with the vote, shouting to our, in our own echo chamber, and then a lot of folks on the left who are saying anyone who has any doubts at all is a seditionist. And what I'm saying is that unwittingly, Speaker Pelosi, not that she meant to do this, but I think she provided a platform where the president and his team can, as you mentioned, in a very sober, methodical, courtroom-like setting before the court of public opinion of America, say, you accuse me of false statements. Let me show you why these statements are not false, or why they're at least reasonable to have these suspicions about the election. And I think it would be actually very healthy for the country to litigate the election in the well of the United States Senate. So far, the Team Trump is not grabbing that attempt, but I implore them to do so, and I've not given up trying to convince President Trump to follow exactly that course.
It seems to me that your argument is very powerful. I have said from the beginning that on this issue I'm agnostic. I don't know how much. I have no doubt that there was some fraud. I don't know if there was enough to change the election. I'm truly in the middle. I read a lot. I am close to people who do believe that it determined the election. Anyway, I am in the middle. So I am the perfect person for you to tell this to. There will be no other chance in the foreseeable future to make the case why a rational person might believe fraud was determinative if it is not done now.
Correct. That's 100% the case. And here's the thing.
Yes.
Yes, effectively this trial, if you will, this should have happened in the respective state capitals, in my view. Okay, it was incumbent upon these state legislatures in these contested states to say, where our own rules followed, was the United States Constitution followed, were these done fairly and justly? That did not happen for a variety of reasons, and I think that's a real shame. And I think those legislatures, 5 of the 6 are Republican, by the way, so I'm criticizing my own party. I think they abdicated their duty. I do not believe, I would disagree with President Trump on this score, I do not believe it was the job of the United States Congress to then step in and overrule those legislatures. But I now believe, again, given what the House has done, what the United States Congress has done, I think that they unwittingly provided a platform for President Trump, and I think it's important for his political viability going forward. But I think more importantly, it's critical for the country. This is an open wound that is simply not going to heal. I mean, I really believe that. And while Nancy Pelosi didn't mean it as an opportunity, I've used this allusion a couple times to the Old Testament Joseph when he confronted his brothers in Egypt. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Well, in this same regard, Nancy Pelosi meant it for evil, but it can be used for good. There can be an opportunity here. And again, the House managers will have a chance to retort anything that President Trump and his team would put forward. So this would not be, simply a speech. This is not a propaganda opportunity. This would be the chance in an adversarial, countervailing strategy to actually litigate this before the American people.
That's right. Even those who believe it's a lie should be advocative of what you're advocating, because then it would be exposed as the lie that they claim it is. Why would anybody oppose, and as you say, with the ability of the Democrats to then refute it?
Right.
So I want it just as a citizen who loves this country. I don't know that the case is airtight. I would like to hear one.
Right. No, you make a great point. You know who should want this most of all, perhaps paradoxically, is Joe Biden. Because there are tens of millions of Americans, I'm one of them, but it's not just people like me who are highly partisan and, in the game, so to speak. There are tens of millions of Americans who do not believe that he's a legitimately elected president of the United States. According to polling, and it ranges anywhere from CNBC, the lowest I've seen among Trump voters, they show only 3% said Biden was legitimately elected. The highest I've seen is CNN. They say that 19% of Trump voters believe Biden was legitimately elected. Let's say it's somewhere roughly in the middle. I mean, you're talking only 10% of 75 million people who believe he won fairly. Now, if he does believe that he, in fact, legitimately won the vote, he, more than anyone, should want to have a full and fair airing of the circumstances. And to me, the most compelling, by the way, which I will admit is not court of law kind of evidence, but it is still compelling to me, are the statistical anomalies which were required for Biden to win. And a lot of this, Dennis, comes from my background, 25 years of trading on Wall Street before I got into politics. Probability analysis was my entire professional life. When I look at the confluence of statistical anomalies that were required for Biden to win, and by that I chiefly mean that he outperformed only in the exact places that he needed to outperform and nowhere else, geographically and demographically, when I look at that, it is so improbable that in my mind it is impossible. But admittedly, again, that is, I think it's compelling, but that is circumstantial. But that points to then the actual courtroom type evidence that can be presented by a team. And what I would argue and what I've written about in my op-eds should be used effectively as the manual for this defense is the Navarro report. Peter Navarro put together what I think is the best and most academically rigorous compendium of all the problems in all 6 states with the election. His defense team could literally take the Navarro report, they could call him as a witness, and they could contest these. Unfortunately, Dennis, look, again, I'm admitting, to the public that I'm not winning this argument right now, but I still think it's an important argument to be made,
all right,
and it's not too late.
What do you believe? Well, I don't care what they say to you. I care what do you believe is the reason they will not address this issue?
Well, and I understand this part from the defense lawyers. Look, a good defense lawyer says let's take as little risk as possible and get the heck out of there, right, with a not guilty verdict. Rather than, you never want to enlarge in the case, right? You want to diminish the case. Let's get to the least amount of subject matter to argue about, and let's get to the quickest possible victory. So I understand that, and I think that is certainly the case of the defense attorneys. Regarding, I have not spoken directly to the president about it. I know he's read my articles. I've not spoken to him about it, so I don't know his thinking. I think part of it from his perspective, and this is my supposition, I don't know this, but for example, he said he wouldn't testify, and I think it would be incredibly powerful if he would go into the well of the Senate himself. I think he doesn't want to dignify the proceedings to a certain extent, that it is such a sham, it's so farcical, that again, let's get it over with as quickly as possible. Let's not dignify it with a lot of process. But again, I think it's a missed opportunity for him and for the country. And to your point, I just can't foresee another opportunity down the line. Where are we going to have this kind of stage, this kind of setting where we can litigate this, and again, so that we can reach some degree of agreement. It may not be that I'm going to say, okay, fine, I think the vote was legitimate, or people on the left are going to say, okay, you're not a seditionist, but we might at least say it was adjudicated, right? And we may not love the result, but it was adjudicated, and now we can all work on fixing elections.
Just in light of a couple of questions, if you could stay on. Steve Cortez, I'm Dennis Prager.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler's a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler. They are even alleging that possibly Parler was bribing Trump because they wanted to give him a part of the company while he was president, or after he was president, they were having the conversation. However, new information now shows that Facebook, not Parler, played the largest role in the Capitol Hill riot. New data from the American Department of Justice shows that despite the media and big tech campaign against Parler, it was Facebook which served as the top rallying point for those storming the Capitol building on January the 6th, Forbes reports. This is The Post-Millennial by Noah David Alter Toronto.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Steve Cortez is my guest, very high ranking in the Trump administration in the final half year or so. And we're talking about the impeachment trial that is taking place and how he wishes that, in fact, the president or his counselors did, in fact, address the issue of was it an honest election, because that's the elephant in the room, right? I mean, if they keep calling it a lie, it wouldn't hurt. They don't even have to prove that it happened. They have to say that a rational and reasonable person has reason to suspect that it might happen. That's all Correct. They would have to do, in my opinion. So there's a difference between a lie and a mistake.
Correct.
You could say, look, it's mistaken to say that the election was determined by fraud, but that's not the same as a lie.
Right, and you're exactly correct. They're not saying you're mistaken, right, or no, you're wrong, and here's why. They're calling it the, quote, big lie, not just a lie, the big lie, which, as you well know, is an incredibly loaded term, quite purposefully used here. What they are trying to do is to demonize and vilify anyone who voices skepticism about the election.
That is correct.
And that
is if you voice skepticism about Donald Trump's election, you wrote for the New York Times.
Exactly right, and so they're trying to go even. I would say even further than just demonize. I think they're trying to go to the point of criminalize. Right, you will not question these election results. I really believe that's how significant this is. So, in other words, and if you've noticed in the House manager's presentation, they keep using that phrase over and over, the big lie. And they clearly want this fantasy that no reasonable person can have suspicions about the election. They want this fantasy to become the prevailing orthodoxy, and to speak against it makes you into a then, quote, terrorist, another phrase they're using a lot, right? Because you are directly responsible for violence if you have suspicions about the election. And by the way, Dennis, part of the reason that I don't believe in the validity of the election from a common sense perspective, and admittedly, again, this is circumstantial, it's not evidence-based, but I think it's compelling nonetheless. Part of the reason is, why are they going to such lengths to try to dismiss even the discussion of the election, unless they themselves perhaps know that these gains were not legitimate? I mean, in other words, the violence with which they are treating just suspicion about the election is, in and of itself, in my view, at least lends itself to the view that something really untoward went on here, and that they know it, and that they have to shut down discussion.
Well, it is unprecedented where a discussion is shut down and virtually criminalized. People who said that 9/11 was a fantasy, it was a cockamamie nonsense, it's just dismissed as cockamamie nonsense. They're not declared the public enemy of the country.
Right.
So I think,
and that's what's important here too, Dennis. It's that they're not, in a sense, they're not going after Trump. I mean, they are, of course, and I think they're
going after you and me and 74 million others at least.
Correct.
Yes, I agree.
Correct.
I have another question, and that is, why doesn't the defense just saturate that room with videos of left-wing riots?
Right. Well, listen, they may. I don't know yet, and I'm not part of that defense team, so I don't know. But I 100% concur with you that would be a great idea. Because also, remember this, I think in those opening statements, which, well, they weren't really opening statements. It was the vote to have the trial, right, on the constitutionality. what the House impeachment managers did, and I have to say they did it in a compelling way, very dishonest, but very compelling, is they made a highly emotional case. They presented a narrative to the American people. And Trump's lawyers largely answered with process claims, right, and with constitutional claims, which are valid. But again, it's as if you're fighting in different arenas. Right. And in the court of public opinion, we have to answer a narrative with a more compelling narrative. So my hope is, to your point, when they get to present now in terms of in the real trial, that we have to counter their narrative with a more compelling and thankfully factually based narrative about, let's talk about actual instigation of violence all over this country, which was caused, at least in part, by the acquiescence and in some cases encouragement of significant figures on the left. You know, for example, let's get specific here. I did a lot of TV when I was at CNN with Chris Cuomo, and he and I sparred all the time, largely over Antifa. He told me on the air, you know, the listeners can hear the tape, he said Antifa is a good cause. Now, he claimed it got carried away at times, you know, but it's a good cause. Of course, I pushed it, but no, it is not a good cause, right? It is about political power through force. But those kinds of statements from significant figures on the left gave a lot of license to Antifa.
They ought to contrast, exactly, that they should have all the statements of Democratic officials who either supported or did nothing with regard to the burning down of their cities. They should contrast that to the instant condemnation of every leading Republican of what happened on January 6th.
Right.
They don't know how to go for the jugular on the right. They just don't.
I agree. By the way, you know, this, to me, the best example there, how about now Vice President Kamala Harris, then Senator from your state, from California.
Right, about bail.
How about, yeah, exactly, raising bail funds for extremely violent, we're not talking about political protesters who got arrested for trespassing or something like that. No. For literally, one of them, Jamil, gosh, I'm forgetting his last name, but one of them arrested for attempted murder of police, freed by the Minnesota Freedom Fund, so-called, which she actively solicited funds for publicly on her Twitter account, and which at least a dozen Joe Biden staffers contributed toward. I mean, you want to talk about condoning political violence and the riots in Minnesota. They directly did it, not even indirectly, not in a roundabout way. They actually said, we will pay to get you out of jail after you violently assault the city, including trying to kill cops.
Well, you're, as usual, you're a sobering, you're a combination of passion and sobriety. I love it. So
that's a good combo, right?
All right. Looking forward to that cigar with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much. Steve Cortez, a colleague of mine on AM 560 in Chicago. The Wind. This is the last opportunity, maybe for a generation, for the Republicans to make the case for why people might believe that a fraud on a large scale took place in the 2020 election. I hadn't thought of it until Steve Cortez raised it, but it makes perfect sense to me. As I said, it is the elephant in the room. And frankly, I said from the beginning, I didn't want Joe Biden elected, but if he was elected, I really wanted to have been honest. We'll be back.
This is Albert Mueller for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mueller.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
If you're an attorney, is there a job? Is there a job more important than this one? I mean, is it more prestigious than to defend any president in a Senate impeachment trial? Bruce Castor again. Video cut 1. Play cut.
House managers who spoke earlier were brilliant speakers. And I made some notes, and they'll hear about what I think about some of the things they said later when I'm closing the case. But I thought they were brilliant speakers, and I loved listening to them. And they were smart fellows.
Okay, I'm going to get preachy now. Don't ever, if you are in a setting, whether it's a high school debate club or the most important trial of the century, the second impeachment of a president who happens to have left office, don't sing the praises of the other team. How you love listening to them and how great they were. Unless, can you guess? Unless you're better than them. If you're going to crush them with your rhetoric, with your argument, with your evidence, with your style, with your tone, with your delivery, then you can do it. Then you can risk it. Even then, not advisable.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We already know that tech companies were interfering in the 2020 election significantly. Little did we know there was both private and public pressure to have the tech companies act as political referees to the benefit of Joe Biden and the Democrats. The most interfered with election in American history. Let me say that again. It was the most interfered with election in American history. From the private interests to the tech interests to the changing of how we do voting in this country, it was as if it was the first election in American history, because every election before it was done in completely different ways. But these tech companies have incredible influence over Congress. They give millions of dollars through lobbying and direct contributions to be able to dictate the legislative agenda and the regulatory agenda. Remember, President Donald Trump, as one of the last things he did as president, tried to get Section 230 removed as part of the National Defense Bill.
Hello, my friends. Dennis Prager here. I want to remind you that I am going with you to Israel at the end of October. Hundreds of you. It's a trip of a lifetime, and you'll meet spectacular people, and you need it badly. Kindred spirits. That would be, if I were not doing radio and PragerU and a lot of other things, but if I did other work, I would create an internet space for people with kindred spirits to meet. Because I don't know how you go through this era in American life without these people in your life. I'm super blessed in that regard because being a public figure, obviously, I'm sort of a magnet for such people, and my cup runneth over with wonderful people in my life. 4 of whom are actually visiting in the studio now. Is that fair to say, living martyr? No, I mean it. I'm very serious about that. And so I'm very lucky, but not all of you have that. Whenever I meet people, last night there was a woman visiting our house, longtime friend of my wife. She's a single woman. I think she's about 40. And I asked her a question I ask a lot of people that I meet. Do you have friends? And people find it an odd question. Who doesn't have friends? But then it was interesting because she said, well, do you mean somebody you tell everything to? I said, yeah, that's my definition of a friend. And then it turned out that probably didn't. It's a very interesting question. If you don't have that, do you miss it? Because if you never had it, you don't know what you're missing. Anyway, as you know, I think about all these things a lot. The country is undergoing an assault that it has never undergone. Assault on every founding principle, most specifically liberty. It is so bad that the French newspapers have actually attacked the ideas coming from America today as too anti-liberty. When the French attack America for suppressing freedom, you know you've really reached a milestone. And the French are right. I think they should ask for the Statue of Liberty back right now. I'm not being hyperbolic. The state of liberty in this country right now stinks. Stinks. All 100% due to the left. And your liberal relatives and friends support the left. This will be the everlasting shame of liberals that they allowed the left to destroy freedom in this country. I expected better from liberals. But the combination of intimidation and the human proclivity to cowardice. Cowardice is normal. Courage is abnormal, right? I mean, let's be honest. As I noted earlier, like with the virus, when I see people walking alone outdoors wearing a mask, I know the phrase, the current new phrase. It's not, what is the old one again? Better safe than sorry. It is now abundance of caution. And I noted that its acronym is AOC. How appropriate. Abundance of caution. Did you mean abundance of caution or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? And the answer to that is yes. That's right. All righty, everybody. Matt in Simi Valley, California. Thank you for calling.
Hi, I just wanted to talk about relitigating something in Congress like you guys were just talking about. There were over 50 cases. Patsy Wise versus Damon Sarcosta. If you try to relitigate it in the Senate or Congress, you're going to take away states' rights. And I followed Giuliani going through all the different states, giving all of the evidence he thought he had, and none of it made sense. I searched high and low for cases of voter fraud, and I came up with 3 dead people voting. I'm from Georgia originally, and they said over 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. I searched high and low, and the only thing I found was from the Office of the District Attorney in Pennsylvania, where they went after a guy who happened to be a Republican who had he requested absentee ballots from his dead mom and his mother-in-law.
Forgive me. I have to break. I have hard breaks on the show. I'll respond as soon as we return, and I thank you for calling. Relief Factor is one of the greatest products I've ever advertised because I am a big believer that you should get rid of gratuitous pain. I divide pain in life between the necessary. There's pain in childbirth. That's necessary pain. Although I'm a big fan of epidurals for women. I don't believe I could give birth. I'm sorry. In any event, relief factor relieves pain. Why wouldn't you try it? I don't get it. For $19.95 for 3 weeks, just give it a try. ReliefFactor.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline, USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving riot. And then the vote was taken, 56-44. 6 Republicans joined with the Democrats in claiming that this show trial, this snap impeachment, is constitutional. Bill Cassidy, for some reason, out of the clear blue, last week he's on TV saying, oh, it's a show trial, doesn't mean anything, it's unconstitutional. But because he didn't like the performance of the president's lawyers yesterday, somehow he decided to vote suddenly that it was constitutional. But then again, that brings you to 6 Republicans, which means you're far short from the 17 Republican threshold to get a conviction. They've given away the ending. The vote yesterday sort of confirms that Trump will be acquitted, which will lead to the former president correctly claiming he's been vindicated. Certainly vindicated from an impeachment, claim that he incited an insurrection. I don't know how many times, how many places you can play this.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So the Democrats claim that Trump saying go peacefully, let your voice be heard, or make your voice heard peacefully incites a riot and an insurrection. Great. Good luck with that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I want to talk to you about where we are in the culture and in the nation right now. So talk to us. What are you thinking?
As you know, I reaffirmed my faith in Jesus Christ when I was going through this crucible of being tortured in a politically motivated prosecution by Robert Mueller. Now, I know you missed this, Eric, along with everybody else in the country, but at midnight on Election Day, the busiest news day of the year, the Department of Justice released the last unredacted sections of the Mueller report regarding Roger J. Stone Jr. And you know what they said? They never had any factual evidence whatsoever against me regarding the Russians, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, stolen emails, John.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager. Regarding the last phone call, I don't think anybody has argued that dead people voting determined elections. It's used as an example of the incompetence of authorities in the way in which balloting is done. But when you send out deliberately tens of millions, scores of billions of ballots unsolicited by people, it's not a matter of absentee voting. There is only one reason to do so, and that is to enable fraud. I mean, I don't see any other possible reason. After all, why did overwhelmingly Democrat-run states send out tens of millions, like California? Why? They said COVID, but COVID is a front. You think they won't do it in 2024? When there is, I guess, well, according to Dr. Fauci, there will always be COVID. We'll always need masks. There'll always be deprivation of children from school. School might be ended forever, which I have mixed feelings about, I might add, to be honest. Schools are rotten. They are. Most schools are rotten. And you should take your kid out of school and love them up with homeschooling and meet other kids and actually learn things. How's this for a deal? Let's compare 5,000 homeschooled kids in any given state with 5,000 private school kids. Forget public school. And see who knows more. Just who knows more. If we actually measure maturity, wisdom, and happiness, there's no contest between homeschool kids and kids who went to school. There were some wonderful kids who go to regular schools. Of course, that's true. There were some jerks who were homeschooled. But as a general rule, I am dazzled by the knowledge, by the lack of jadedness. That's a big one. Kids are so jaded so early in this society, thanks to the rotten left having deprived them of innocence. The left is a form of child abuse. It truly is. The teachers are engaged in child abuse, just not showing up now to teach classes. I volunteered to go into a classroom without a mask and teach any number of kids, because the transmission of young people to older people is almost zero. But if the New York Times or the LA Times controls the way in which you learn about life, you won't know what I just said. You won't know much, to be honest. You will live in a fake world. But I know your world. I spend half the time. Last night I spent more time reading the Daily Beast than I did all the conservative sources put together. And that's on the left. Even if you should be intellectually curious enough. If you're on the left, you should just be intellectually curious to listen to talk radio. Right? I mean, just intellectual curiosity. Gee, what do these crackpots say? Isn't that interesting? After all, tens of millions of people listen to us. You might want to know. Before you attack talk radio, why don't you listen to some of us? Okay. Anyway, there is a Navarro report which does delineate in very sober ways reasons for fraud. My argument has been from the beginning that there are so many anomalies. It's sort of like, and of course the atheist will say, yes, exactly, your arguments for God are just as poor as your arguments for fraud in this election. But opening myself up for that attack, and will tell you, one of the arguments, one of the rational arguments, and my belief in God is based on reason. No, I don't have a big leap of faith element in my life. Reason, that's why I call my Bible commentary the Rational Bible. Which is not to say that others who come to God more mystically are wrong. This is my vehicle. My vehicle to God is reason. There are too many anomalies for me to believe that the world created itself. There are too many anomalies for me to believe that intelligent life on this little planet called Earth just came about by itself. The number of things that have to be right, the tilt of the Earth, the rotation of the amount of distance from the sun. There are so many that it ends up that the odds are 1 in a trillion or more than 1 in a trillion. So I say, is this proof that there is a God? I don't have any proof there is a God. None. I don't even like any book that says proofs for God. I'm skeptical with regard to. I don't think there are proofs. God did not make himself provable. But I weigh the odds, and the odds are overwhelmingly likely that there is a creator. Overwhelmingly. So when I look at all the anomalies, and I listed them in a recent column of mine, if you'd like to take a look, like it's the first time in 130 years that an incumbent president got more votes than he got the first time and lost. That's an anomaly. There are 19 counties in this country that are considered bellwether counties. The way they go is the way the national election goes. You would think that of the 19, let's say 9 went for Trump, 10 went for Biden. You would think 18 went for Trump. That's a very big statistical anomaly that is not worthy of your contempt and your laughter. You can say, look, anomalies don't prove anything. They may not, but they do suggest something to the coherent mind. Just as the anomalies, I find it much more likely that intelligence came from intelligence than intelligence came from non-intelligence. If you found a computer on a planet, you would assume intelligence put it there because it has information in it. Information is DNA. DNA is information. How do you get information from non-information? Rocks don't produce information. So this notion you are stuck. The atheist is stuck. The leftist is stuck with, well, you can't prove it. Can you prove that the world will go to pot in 20 years if we don't do draconian things about climate change? Why do you believe that? That is certainly not provable.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The reason that I am having trouble with the argument is the American people just spoke, and they just changed administrations. So in the light most favorable to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, their system works. The people are smart enough, in the light most favorable to them, they're smart enough to pick a new administration if they don't like the old one. And they just did. And he's down there, Pennsylvania Avenue now.
If you were wondering, that's not the White House legal counsel. Just in case you were wondering, that person, whether you say, oh, the American people are so wise they chose Joe Biden. Allegedly, that's Bruce Castor, who, according to reports, works for the 45th President of the United States. Why he spent time on that argument yesterday? Your job is not to praise the last election. It's to deal with the charge of incitement to insurrection. Now, I looked at this guy's bio. He has he was a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, put some very bad people away, including murderers. But what happened to him? Again, from yesterday, this is Bruce Castor talking about one of our founding fathers. Video cut 2. Play cut.
Paraphrasing the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, who, as a Philadelphian, I feel as though I can do that because he's my founding father too.
He's my founding.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler is a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler. They are even alleging that possibly Parler was bribed.
Oh, I didn't do Pure Talk? Hey, everybody, want to remind you, dial pound 250, say Dennis Prager, and you'll get information on Pure Talk. I got a phone, signed up with them, $30 a month, unlimited text, unlimited talk, and 6 gigabytes of data. That's impressive. And I couldn't believe it, so I signed up. It's the real deal. Dial pound 250 and say Dennis Prager. Get 50% off your first payment as well, by the way. Yep, as I've always said, my mother has 2 sons, or may she rest in peace, had 2 sons. One is a professor of medicine, and the other is a promo code. That is what the Jews call nachas. This is joy from one's children. Yeah, Kenny's a professor of medicine, and then this is a promo code. Not bad. 1 for 2. First of all, 1 for 2 isn't bad. You know, you're batting 500 with your kids. That beats Babe Ruth. That beats Ty Cobb. It's interesting, huh? Isn't that interesting? There's no proof that there was fraud. That's probably true, or at least enough to decide the election. But there's very little we go on proof. It's like the people now, this is the left's new thing. There's no proof. Where there's no double-blind study to show that ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine and zinc combats COVID, really. But there are vast numbers of studies and countries using it who have far lower rates of COVID. Is that proof? Nope. Is it suggestive? Yes. You know that somebody wrote me a letter. Their 81-year-old mother-in-law was in an ICU with COVID. They wouldn't give her ivermectin. She was about to go on a ventilator and drop dead. They snuck in ivermectin. She is now on the regular ward getting ready to leave. I didn't even know it works at that late stage. Read my column this week. We live life not just on proofs. We live lives on what is more likely given a rational mind. Creator or no creator. Cheating or no cheating. Now, you may conclude, and I respect that. In fact, my next fireside chat will be a debate with an atheist. I respect honorable atheists. I respect honorable Democrats. Becoming a smaller group, but they exist. But this immediate dismissal, no proof. You have any proof that life is endangered with extinction because of global warming? No, you don't. Have a great day.